good to see so many people taking time today to join us. One of the things we wanted to do now that we are into the fall season with Labor Day having just passed was to reach out to members and friends and give them kind of an update on what's going on with ATFL, and to also, much to our pleasure, have the chance to hear from two members of Congress who have both been very supportive of ATFL and, of course, of Lebanon, more importantly and broadly. And so I think in light of the fact that they're already on and we are grateful for the time they have, I'm going to just begin the program. We have today Congressman Darin LaHood from Peoria, Illinois. Darin, I think tomorrow is that the 5th anniversary of your election to the House tomorrow?
Well, you did your research, Spence. It is.
Yeah, it was quite a auspicious celebration. So he'll be a 5-year member of the House. He's on the Ways and Means Committee, but importantly has been one of the co-chairs of the Friends of Lebanon caucus in the Congress, and has been very active in issues of importance to the community, and a frequent traveler, as was his father when he was in the House, to Lebanon to do things in support of their family heritage. And we're also joined by another good friend of both our organization in Lebanon, Donna Shalala from Florida, who, as I think everybody knows, served as Secretary of Health and Human Services. She was the presiding officer, the president of two of the country's most distinguished universities, and now she represents South Florida in the House of Representatives. And I had the occasion to go to her office shortly after her election last year, and had with me some friends from Lebanon, and she greeted us very warmly. And I remember her saying that one of the, in addition to her constituents in Florida, that she was looking forward to doing good things for Lebanon, and she has. And like Darin, she's been a visitor. You've traveled to Lebanon as part of a delegation, and has kept on top of these issues for us. And so what I'd like to do, maybe, Darin, I'll let you go first for just a few minutes. If you just give us some thoughts you have on both the situation in Lebanon and the perspective of your office and Congress. And Donna, if you would follow up, and then we know you both have other things that you need to get to today. And after that, we'll move to the team that leads ATFL to give a little update on the organization. So Darin, take it away.
Well, thank you, Secretary Abraham, and thanks for your leadership at ATFL. And let me just acknowledge and welcome everybody to the call. It's great to see all of you. And let me give a special thanks to Ed and Leslie for all of your efforts at ATFL, and happy to be on with my friend and colleague, Donna Shalala. We were actually on a call a couple hours ago with Assistant Secretary Schenker and USAID, and we'll happy to fill you in on that. But let me just, again, thank ATFL for your advocacy and all you do for the relationship between the U.S. and Lebanon. And we were fortunate, as Spence mentioned, last September and October, a little less than a year ago, we were in Lebanon, Congresswoman Shalala and myself and Garrett Graves, thanks to ATFL and your organization for putting that together. But we had a wonderful trip. That seems like 10 years ago because of everything that's transpired in Lebanon and obviously with COVID, but it wouldn't have been possible without ATFL. I do want to just reference a couple things before I turn it over to Donna. One, obviously the tragic explosion and blast that affected Lebanon and obviously, was news all over the world. After that happened, Donna and I and a number of our colleagues from the U.S. Friendship Caucus got together and we wrote a letter. We quickly got about 100 co-sponsors within 2 days and sent a letter off to the administration and the State Department seeking obviously humanitarian help and food assistance and debris clearing, and help with the investigation. And all of that happened quickly. But again, it was the partnership with ATFL, working through the U.S. Lebanese Friendship Caucus, that we were able to do that swiftly and quickly to get the response we did, and the showing, again, of over about 100 members of Congress. So I wanted to mention that. Secondarily, I am the co-chair of the U.S. Lebanese Friendship Caucus with Charlie Crist, and we continue to work in a collaborative way on these issues that affect Lebanon and the U.S. Very proud recently that we introduced House Resolution 1077 that lays out in detail, and I think in an impactful way, the robust relationship between U.S. and Lebanon, and the importance that we continue to stay focused on that for our goal of a sovereign, prosperous, and independent Lebanon. And so we're happy with that. Donna is one of my original co-sponsors on the bill, along with a number of other members of Congress. But when anybody wants to know where our relationship is, they can look to the resolution as kind of a roadmap for the relationship with Lebanon. So the call we had earlier this morning with Assistant Secretary Shanker was really a readout on his visit to Lebanon last week. I'm sure many of you have read about that. He was there for about 2.5 days. He is very smart and very capable. He knows all the players in Lebanon. And we had a number of members of Congress on the call, and got an update on where aid from USAID is going and the humanitarian efforts. But more importantly, we got Shanker's perspective, I think, on the where the government is headed. Talked about elections and some of what France is advocating for. And as you saw yesterday, the designation by the State Department on 2 former ministers on their complicity with Hezbollah. He talked about that, and obviously that sent a strong message from the U.S., I think, on the relationship with Hezbollah and how that is not going to be tolerated. And so we got an update on that. I think what we've all, 2 things that I had questions on. First of all, what I think we all know now is eliminating the thought that terrorism had something to do with the explosion of the blast. Shanker seems to think that, again, everything that he's seen and learned, that's not the case. And I guess that's a positive. But secondarily, did he believe this is a leverage point or a mechanism or a triggering kind of an inflection point of changing things in Lebanon? And also couple that with the currency crash that has happened and the protests. To be honest with you, I mean, Shanker is pretty upfront and blunt, and he he can't make that determination yet. He wishes that was the case. He had good meetings with all of the players last week. He thinks that there is clearly an effort being put forth by France and a message from the administration that there will be more aid and help. But again, Lebanon has to cure many of their own problems as it relates to corruption, as it relates to their financial mess, and again, not being able to have a functioning government. And so we discussed a number of those issues today. And I wish I could tell you on the call that I felt optimistic that somehow this is a changing or a triggering factor with Lebanon, that things are going to be different and better moving forward. I think there's many more eyes on it, and I think there's more of a push with that. But I'm not sure Shanker was confident in saying that he thinks that change will come about with that. So with that, I'll turn it over to my good friend, Congresswoman Shalala.
Donna, we have to unmute you. Go ahead.
Unmute me. I'm unmuted. Thanks very much. I want to thank Senator Abraham. You're welcome in my office anytime, just wear a mask. I want to thank Ed Gabriel and Leslie. Just keeping in touch with us, I think, is important, and making sure that we're sharing information. Darin LaHood has been an unbelievable leader of our group, along with Representative Chris, but it's really been Darin. And I hope you hear from the 2 of us that on Lebanon, we are clearly bipartisan. We get lots of people to sign on to these pieces, resolutions or legislation. We have lots of support across the aisle with all this discussion about politicizing issues. We really work closely together and reach across the aisle. And I think that that's reflected in the State Department report. I thought Schenker was very competent. I didn't, and even the US aid people, when we asked, Ed, I asked specifically about money for AUB and the Lebanese American University, and they've already released some of that money. They released it early. And so that they knew our interest, particularly in the universities and in the long-time scholarship money that's been provided. But I sensed a level of sophistication from them. I don't know how much more patience there is about the Lebanese politicians getting their act together, but certainly we got a pretty candid report from them. And I think the best news I can give you is that the people of Lebanon continue to get the support of a Congress, but also of the American people. When I say I'm Lebanese in my community, everybody smiles because everybody knows someone that's Lebanese. But my sense is that we do have more than bipartisan support. We have support across the country for Lebanon. But boy, they've got a lot of work to do in the future. We'll continue to work on very specific issues, particularly on humanitarian aid. And Ed and I worked together to get some aid. I got the Clinton Foundation involved a little bit, but Ed really put it together so that we got aid almost immediately to Lebanon. But Lebanon needs a lot more, and we talked a little and got a report on COVID, because the mixture of this disaster and COVID, which is experiencing community spread there, which means it's out of control, means that the Lebanese hospitals are not only overwhelmed with the disaster, but also with COVID patients at the same time. We'll continue to do everything we can to get resources, particularly to the Lebanese people, to support the Lebanese army, and to make sure that we're working seamlessly across the aisle for Lebanon. And I want to thank ATF, the American Task Force, for their support. And I look forward to working with all of you in the future. Thank you.
Darin and Donna, thank you. Really, we are grateful for all the different things you've been doing and the speed with which you've done them. As Darin said, the bipartisan letter was put together quickly and garnered so many signatures. I mean, for people that question whether there's support for Lebanon in the Congress, I think the answer was very emphatic. Obviously, any of the support has to be met with activity in Lebanon that takes advantage of it. And so one of the things we hope to do as a task force is to generate goodwill and support on our side, but obviously we also hope to be able to make sure that it's a positive reaction on both sides. And to that end, I think over the last year or a year plus, really, we've been engaged in a multitude of new activities in the task force. And to kind of bring us up to date on that, what I'm going to do is turn the program over to Ed and to Leslie, and then to others, Jay and John, I think, from the team. I'll just say to Darin and Donna, we are grateful for the time you've given us. If you need to sign off at any point, whether now or in a few minutes, I know you both had other assignments this afternoon, please accept our thanks, and we'll look to stay in touch and work going forward with both of you. And thanks for being with us. And Ed, now I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Spence. Just before our members get off, I do want to say thank you. Darin's leadership has been remarkable. The caucus has really taken on new challenges, and they've been a real leader for our community. So I want to say a special thanks to Darin and Donna and Garrett Graves and Charlie Christ and the other 24 or so members of the caucus. And a shout out to Donna. She mentioned earlier, we went after the explosion, the day after the explosion, we got a call from the State Department saying that they really wanted to see if we could create people-to-people mission to Lebanon with medicine as quickly as possible, and that they would put it on a plane. We started calling every doctor we knew, and we weren't getting very far with that. And finally, I called the former Secretary of Health and Human Services, Donna Shalala, and she put me onto the Clinton Foundation, which had access to a number of NGOs, which Jean Abinader will describe a little bit later for you. But with a free plane that we finally located, we sent $13 million of medicine over there within about 10 days. So bravo to you, Donna, as well. And thank you to both of you. I now also want to say thank you to everyone on this call. You know, it's the support you give us that allow us to really do our job. And the support you give us is one way. You never ask for what do you get out of it. You give from your hearts because you think that what we're doing is of value to the bilateral relationship between our two countries. And I have to say thank you for that, because it's your donations that really keep ATFL going. Now with that, I'm going to go into our PowerPoint, which I think we mailed out earlier today. You know that who we are, so I'm not going to go into that at all. But we should say that, you know, we are promoting and educating the strengthening of the U.S.-Lebanon relationship. And as Spence mentioned today, I think we've gone farther than any other time in our history as an organization, which this year, by the way, is celebrating its 30th anniversary. So let me just pull this up very quickly for you. We should be on the screen. Are we on the screen, everyone? I think we are. Tell me.
Yes, you are, Ed, you are.
Thank you very much. So let me jump down to the slide on Congress. Actually, I think Darin and Donna described what has been going on this year in Congress, but I'm going to ask Jay Gazelle, who's with our sister organization, the U.S. Lebanon Policy Council, and describe for you. I think we've got at least 3 or 4 letters that came out this year, 2 resolutions, and maybe a third on its way. So there's been a lot of activity. Jay, would you mind going into some detail for our audience on the congressional side?
Sure. Thanks, Ed, and thanks, Spence, and thank you to Congressman LaHood and Congresswoman Shalala, and to their staff, Mary Ellen and Ben, who have just been incredibly not only helpful but responsive, and whenever we call, they are 7 steps ahead of us. But as others have mentioned, you know, dealing with Lebanon is always challenging, particularly on Capitol Hill. And the year began with Lebanon in the crosshairs of some members of Congress who had introduced legislation to condition, that means to reduce, aid to Lebanon, including withholding 20% of aid to the LAF. Those bills are still pending, but probably unlikely to go further this year, given the dwindling number of days remaining in this Congress. Since the August 4 blast at the port, however, we have seen a swing in sentiment. As soon as we approached Congressman LaHood and Congresswoman Shalala's office, amongst others, you know, immediately the response was positive and overwhelming, and they spearheaded several initiatives to provide immediate and unconditional humanitarian assistance, a request that was promptly obliged as evidenced by the rapid introduction and of the positive resolution, which, as the Congressman said, garnered about 100 supporters in the House of Representatives within literally, I think, a day and a half, less than 2 days, and also a strong letter to Secretary Pompeo to urge the release of humanitarian assistance to Lebanese NGOs and American NGOs, including the universities, LAU and AUB. And in addition to the letter and the resolution in the House, we also have seen similar positive momentum in the Senate, a resolution introduced by the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and the ranking Democrat and many others, as well as a strong letter also to Secretary Pompeo and to AID Administrator Barsa to urge quick and immediate humanitarian assistance and relief to those in need. So currently where things stand is there are these two resolutions, as the Congressman mentioned, the one in the House, the number is 1077, House Resolution 1077, and the Senate resolution is S682. I would urge each of you, if you haven't already, to contact your two senators and your congressman to urge them to co-sponsor these resolutions. The way it works is the more signatures that, or the more supporters that sign on to these resolutions, the easier it is for our congressmen and our senators who drafted these resolutions to urge the leadership to bring it to a vote. And once again, with the dwindling number of days in this Congress, we really need to hopefully get something passed here, if not before the election, and the Congress will adjourn around October 2nd for Election Day. But certainly when they come back in the lame duck session, we'd like to see both of those resolutions passed through the House and through the Senate. Finally, let me just say a quick word about where we stand with aid to Lebanon. So you all know that annually the United States provides foreign assistance to allies. Lebanon is no different. And frankly, Lebanon has been a large beneficiary on a per capita basis of US aid, in no small part thanks to the support of the Congressional Caucus led by the two congressmen and congresswomen who are with us today. Currently, the House has passed the bill that deals with aid to Lebanon, and it is very positive. It includes robust assistance in both economic support and in military support. The Senate, however, hasn't taken up any of the bills for other reasons, but we hope to have those done depending on the outcome of elections, either in December or probably early next year, and we will keep you posted on that. I think I'll stop there, and if there's time, I can answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Jay, and thank you for all the good work you're doing. The next, I assume you can see this slide. I'm not seeing it myself, so let me see. Let me move it over. Can you see it? Is this slide visible for everyone?
Sort of, half and half.
Yeah, so is there a way to make it smaller? Let's see if we can.
At the top of the pictures, click on the smallest divot, smallest column, and it takes the pictures away. You don't need to play with it. Just change the pictures.
Just take
Okay. Okay, so let me do that. Okay. So can you see it now, folks? Let's go next to the U.S. administration, what we've been doing there. I'm going to ask Leslie to cover that for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. And Spence and Congresswoman Shalala and Darin, we've obviously had a very busy year and appreciate everyone's support who's on today. Part of our work, a lot of our work is interface with the U.S. administration to make sure that, you know, we're able to focus on the key issues and bring in the broad support of the Lebanese American diaspora, you know, for the administration to understand. And the State Department in particular, I think many of you know that Undersecretary Hale was former ambassador to Lebanon, U.S. ambassador to Lebanon. So ATFL has a very good relationship and rapport with him, and he's uniquely interested in Lebanon. And as some of you know as well, Secretary Pompeo's district congressional district had a large Lebanese American community. So he himself has also been to Lebanon several times along with his wife. So he also is familiar with the country, which is very helpful, particularly now. Congressman LaHood mentioned Assistant Secretary Shanker. We've had multiple conversations with him as well. And we're in regular contact with the Lebanon desk. So in terms of kind of up-to-date information on Lebanon, what we can do to help as an organization and having accurate information and access to administration officials, that's going very well. That is also true with our relationship with the Defense Department. As Jay's mentioned, they're very critical. Defense is a critical ally of support of the LAF. So it's very helpful for us to kind of stay in touch with them and their thinking and be creative about additional ways to provide support to the LAF, particularly in these really austere times for Lebanon. So that's a really critical relationship as well as the National Security Council. And we've had an excellent relationship with Ambassador Richard, who left her post in Lebanon. As many of you saw, we were going to honor her this year at our gala, which has been postponed, but she was a great advocate for the relationship, and we've continued our dialogue with her, and that's continued on with her successor, Ambassador Shea, who's been excellent to work with as well. And finally, we've been working more with USAID on the humanitarian side of the equation. So we've had very high-level meetings there about how we can increase support to Lebanon, kind of near-term support. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about the humanitarian aspect of that later in the presentation.
Thanks, Leslie. So next, we'll talk about outreach communications. We're going to ask Jean to quickly go through some of the things we're doing, some of the new things we're doing, and we'll take it from there. Jean?
Yeah, we've increased the production of our media significantly over the last year and have introduced a new commentary, as it says at the bottom, called This Week in Lebanon, where we give our opinions on certain articles, news notes. We've also set up coalitions with Middle East Institute, Life, and others to both develop the policy paper that was issued in July and also working on humanitarian concerns as well. So that's been very successful, and people have thanked us often about ATFL providing leadership in these different projects. We're also trying to expand the number of presentations we do in public and the interviews that we do as well. The picture there is of Leslie at the Southern Federation, and that went very well from what I've been told, although Karen may have been just trying to make Leslie feel good. Social media, again, we're expanding. We've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, and once you have Facebook, you have Instagram, and now we're opening on to LinkedIn. So I think that in terms of base numbers alone, we've increased our output over the last year and will continue that growth going forward. What's also good is that we are getting our material reproduced and sent out to other networks as well. So other people are picking up our stories, our op-eds and our blogs and broadcasting them even more broadly. That's it, Ed.
Great, thank you. Tomorrow, I will have published a piece in The Hill on the immediate need for the United States to take more interest in humanitarian aid to Lebanon. So we'll send that out to everyone. On the virtual meetings, Leslie touched upon them. Let me just run through them very quickly. You know, when COVID started, we realized we would not be taking no-dels to Lebanon. We wouldn't be going there on official visits. And our meetings in Washington were also going to be limited. So we immediately started a virtual series with our board and key advisors in smaller groups at times to have meaningful policy discussions with Lebanese Armed Forces Commander Joseph Aoun, who we speak to. I speak to probably once a month, if not twice a month. The Bank of Lebanon, Riyad Salami, Lebanese Association of Banks. And so during the crisis, we really honed in on the financial aspects, trying to get at what the problems were there through our discussions with them. And then with now the former Prime Minister Diab, but he had just been, just put a government together in Lebanon when we met with him a few months ago. So we were on top of things. We were the first on a number of fronts. Actually, our interlocutors, by and large, probably were Zooming with us for the first time. As Leslie mentioned, we are very close to David Hale, the number 3 in the Department of State. He cares a great deal about ATFL. He's been with us since the beginning when he was a political counselor in Lebanon, in Beirut, back in the early 90s, and gives us all the time we need to really drill down on policy. David Shanker, we've met with on several occasions. Jeff Feltman, as the former Assistant Secretary, has been very helpful. And as Leslie said, our relationship with the current and past ambassador has been excellent. Also, on the financial aspect, we've been working with the IMF director here in Washington to really understand the financial aspects, which really helps us form our opinions, quite frankly, as we move forward on our policy paper, which has gotten a lot of attention in policy circles. Our congressional members especially appreciated what we did on the policy paper. We'll talk about that in a second. But let me jump first to the Beirut crisis, and I'm going to ask Jean and Leslie to go through that slide together, please.
I'll start off. As Ed said, when we got started, he spoke with Donna, and Donna sent him to the Clinton Foundation, who recommended several organizations that do this all the time. And one, of course, is Direct Relief, which is the major partner for ANIRA, who does, as you know, distribution throughout Palestine and in Lebanon now for about 10 years of supplies to the Palestinian refugee communities and Lebanon to all the populations, not just Palestinians. So Direct Relief worked with us and Afia Foundation in New York, ANIRA, and Manal Saab and her daughter Rochelle set up a website that enabled us to bring in all the different requests that were being made from Lebanon, put them into a database, collate them so that we avoided duplication, identified who the recipient should be, and looked for, and what Direct Relief does is they look at the lists and what they have in their inventory they supply, and what they don't, they go out and buy. So we were very lucky that Manal was able to get Fred Smith at FedEx to contribute a plane. And the reason the plane is important is because they need to be both pressurized and temperature controlled. And that came through, and we were able to send, as Ed said, $13 million worth of pharmaceuticals over. But it couldn't be done without this team effort that was that served us not only for that flight, but is also serving us for the upcoming one tomorrow, and then other ones that we are planning in the future. So I'll turn it over to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Sean. And in tandem with that effort, we've also kind of undertook a unique project that was initially, the idea came from the bishops actually, where we gathered together. We reached out to over 100 US-based NGOs that give humanitarian assistance to Lebanon to join together in an effort to work with the US government to press for additional assistance to Lebanon, given the near-term disaster at the port. So we were able to do, probably about 6 weeks, we reached out and we were able to get over 60 signatories to the letter, and we're adding additional signatories by the week. So if anyone has an organization that we should consider reaching out to, please email me and let me know. We'd be happy to work with them. The goal initially was to work with USAID on a Food for Peace PL 480 program. And we've had some recent discussions with USAID this week, and we will have additional discussions next week. I mean, they're very focused on the near-term problems in Lebanon. We're getting feedback that some of the food issue is taken care of, but they understand that the critical need for access to food is huge. So when we were in Lebanon on prior trips, we were able to visit the refugee camps where they had a voucher system, which kind of facilitated people's ability to get food from Lebanese producers. And we are in dialogue with them about, possibly looking at something similar to alleviate the near-term kind of critical need for access to food in that area. So overall, following on kind of the medical relief, the air relief, the humanitarian coalition, we're also having an eye to the future about reconstruction efforts, and both the coalition that Jean mentioned and kind of the humanitarian one that I just mentioned could play an important role in those efforts in the future as well. Thanks.
Yeah, so let me just add to this and say it's been a remarkable effort by Lebanese Americans from all over the country, many states, Texas, Florida. We mentioned Manal Saab and her leadership efforts. It's been quite amazing. And as we move into the question beyond medical into reconstruction, there are even more partners that we will be talking to. But quite frankly, with the mission that we send tomorrow, we will probably exceed what the U.S. government has given in initial aid of $18 million. So one of our efforts, of course, is to encourage the United States to step up a little stronger on the humanitarian aid front as well. But we're very proud of what ATFL has been able to do to help our community respond quickly. And I must say, it's probably gotten the most attention that we've gotten in a long time when people saw how quickly we were able to move. And it's thanks to so many people. Leslie, do you want to go through very quickly the Lebanese community support programs?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. And so 2 additional efforts that we've been involved in. Early on, we had our own internal ATFL campaign, the Let Lebanon Live campaign. We partnered with Rotary through help from one of our board members. And so that the funds that we raised would go directly to the Lebanese food bank and be distributed for those in need. And we have a number of, well, you can see, I guess, in the corner there, boxes that were packaged and delivered to different families. So we have photos in partnership with Rotary and the Lebanese Food Bank and ATFL. So that has been really meeting a critical need in terms of hunger. And then we've also continued the tradition, the ATFL tradition of sponsoring a landmine detection dog. They, they're well trained. They're managed by the Lebanese Armed Forces, and they are, detecting landmines that have been left there that have continued very sadly to injure civilians and children. So we reached out to 2 donors, and we were able to fund an additional dog who was then flown with a trainer from the U.S. The Marshall Legacy Institute manages the overall program, and our dog, Zatar, has been, we've had a chance to visit him on the last trip to Lebanon and was getting well acclimated with his colleagues. Our previous dog retired.
You don't listen to it.
And one of our board members, the Kassoufs, James and Catherine Kassouf, adopted him. So he's now in their household in Lebanon.
That's cute. Okay, and our last slide, Jean's going to go through, which is one of our more important ones, what we're doing on education and policy. If we could whip through that one, Jean, then we'll have time for some discussion Q&A.
I hope that all of you have had the opportunity to read the policy paper. It is a significant effort on our part, this partnership of convening MEI and ATFL, convening a group of experts to write a paper that looked at where we are in terms of U.S.-Lebanon relations and how to move forward given the ongoing crisis. Now, of course, anything about Lebanon means it's not static, it's dynamic. And so we'll continue to update this as the new government takes place, as the new ministerial statement is accepted. And so we'll continue to revise and upgrade the paper for the next administration. Thanks to a request from Ambassador Shea, we pulled together some of our board members who pulled in the Columbia School of Business Dean, and we provided expert support to the Lebanese Minister of Economy and Trade on developing the new economic recovery plan. That was quite an education for us, and I think we were able to be very useful to the government. We've done a number of position papers that you've seen, and whenever we have requests from the Congress administration on our assessment of what's going on the ground and what the United States can do, we gladly provide that to them. Briefly done.
Thank you, Jean. I'm now gonna, okay, great. We're all back together again. It's good to see you all again. I've been behind a screen, so I couldn't see your faces. Why don't, Spence, with your permission, we'll go through some questions and answers for people, or comments if they want to make them. The easiest way to do that is go to the chat function on the bottom of your screen and just let me know that you want to ask a question, or show yourself on the screen, raise your hand, or otherwise wave at us and we'll know you're to be identified. So either way, with the chat or through just by waving. We have a wave from the Arab front. So we're going to go first to our friend there, please. We're gonna unmute you. Why don't we unmute everyone, Kristen? It might be easier.
Everyone's able to unmute themselves, so.
Okay, great. Please unmute yourself if you know how to do that, probably down in the left-hand corner, depending on your device. We'll come back to you, I promise. Is there?
He's unmuted now.
Okay.
Hi, can I speak now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, we appreciate, the community here appreciates what the task force and all the organizations you have in Congress and so on, trying to help Lebanon. But my information, my humble information, is that we are the richest country in the Middle East. And Israel has turned us to a bunch of beggars. The airplane that was flying over Beirut for a month finally blew up the harbor, and the next day it stopped flying. So I informed several embassies about this airplane, and nobody did anything. So we are sure that Israel hit the harbor. That's number one. Number two, I have information from the British that we are the wealthiest country in the Middle East. In 10 years, the British ambassador told me, we will be knocking on the doors of the Lebanese embassy in London to get visas to come and work in Lebanon. And now the Lebanese are knocking on our embassy to go to work in England. You are the richest country in the world. Get yourself together so that we can develop the oil industry on your shores. That's
I appreciate that question. Let me, just for the sake of time, if I may, let me respond, because this morning we heard some information that it might be useful to you from David Schenker, who reassured the members of Congress that the best information they have now is that it was not an attack. The best information that we have today and they're still investigating, is that it was an explosion because of recklessness and incompetence. Also, I don't think we're the richest nation. Before we were not, and today we are not. As you know, the Gulf countries are pretty wealthy per capita, and we can go from there. But I appreciate it because on the flyovers, the point you make on the flyovers, I think is very important. It's something that the Lebanese continually bring up to the UNIFIL organization, and it's something that I believe we have to really maintain and watch over time. So thank you very much for that comment. I'm next going to go to Leslie Tuma, who has a question. I'm sorry, I think next, Leslie, I'm sorry, is Charlie Shadiak. And then we can go to you. Charlie? Oh, no, that was Charlie. I'm sorry. Okay, we got you. Next to Leslie, please.
Actually, I didn't have a question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, we have Karen Kassouf next. Sorry. And then Wadi. Karen, and then Wadi.
So, following up with respect to the Lebanese armed forces, it sounds as though aid is continuing, but when I read statements from Ambassador Hale about how the Lebanese needs to take over the port, my reaction is they can only do that if the Lebanese army becomes the strongest and dominant state army in the country. And it is not right now. And is anybody in our government looking to beef up the aid and the weapons that we allow the Lebanese army to have in order for them to become a sovereign state?
So Karen, you know, on that front, I think ATFL, Jay, on our behalf, the caucus, the Trump administration, are all in support of a very strong LAF. We're not seeing much pushback. There is an element in Congress that will attack the appropriation process to the LAF because they say it's controlled by Hezbollah. But our efforts and those of the State Department have been such that we have not only protected that funding source, but really addressed the needs that the LAF has brought forth in terms of maintenance and other kinds of issues that they have a need for moving forward. There's nothing that they have not asked for that they haven't gotten in terms of their annual meetings. So there may be things that others want for them, but from their point of view, you know, they could use more troops. They could use more help for the troops because they're suffering with the devaluation of the lira. But as we were told recently, US money is fungible. It was, quote, fungible, which means that with some creative ways of funding things, they may be able to move sources of money around and be able to take care of the troops as well. So in that sense, I think that the one message both Democrat and Republican have against this minority viewpoint is that the LAF is the one institution that we're banking on and counting on. Thank you. Wadi? You have to unmute yourself. I think you're unmuted. You're unmuted.
I don't think he's connected to audio.
Yeah, you're not connected to audio, Wadi. That's really too bad. Oh, there you go. Okay, you should be, now unmute yourself. If you'll unmute yourself, I think you'll be there. down at the bottom. You have to unmute yourself. Down at the bottom. There you are.
Now I'm good? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, as you know, Lebanon now is in its worst situation. Now we have two strategic plans in Lebanon, the French and the American. The French strategy is to deal with Hezbollah. Sarkozy of France, he went to Lebanon, he met with Hezbollah, and he wanted to make a deal, separate the military party of Hezbollah from its political party, and start the dialogue in Lebanon. The American strategy is no, we don't want to deal with Hezbollah, and we're gonna sanction every politician in Lebanon who deals with Hezbollah, including the two ministers yesterday. What ATFL stands for? What do you think is the best strategy in Lebanon? Is to tell Lebanese people, oh, you have to deal with Hezbollah, or we're not gonna help you? And Lebanon, through the history of Lebanon, we had the Palestinians army long time ago, and it was destroyed by Israel and Syria. We had the Syrian army, it withdrew from Lebanon through Taif, through international coalition after Hariri was assassinated. Lebanese cannot get rid of Hezbollah armed forces. It's an international, it's a big issue on the Lebanese. So, and I believe most of the Lebanese want the French strategy rather than the American strategy. Can you tell us?
So let me give you what we see as the French-U.S. position moving forward, which is pretty recent based upon conversations that we've had. First of all, the French and the U.S. are working hand in hand. They're working very closely. They may be working a good cop, bad cop strategy, but they are working closely together. And you'll recall in the French president's last visit, he threatened sanctions. So you have to realize that they are singing from the same tune when it comes to working together on a couple of fronts. Now, let me break this down for you. There are two immediate needs that we have to focus on, I think, as a U.S. strategy for the short term, the next 60 days. Then there are kind of two ways to look at the longer term, the medium and longer term function, okay? In the short term, we have to encourage the United States to really up its humanitarian flights. You know, the American people are ready to fill planes, but wouldn't it be better to have U.S. Air Force planes landing as opposed to FedEx planes in terms of reaching civil society and the people in the hospitals? So that's one issue that we've really got to stay focused on to help Lebanon. And we've got to get the United States to join with us in that regard. The second one is they now have a new prime minister that's going to form a new government. Many people in the United States believe, and France believes, this is the last shot before it crumbles, before Lebanon crumbles. This is the absolute last shot. So they're really trying to push the sectarian leadership in the parliament to understand that they must allow this guy to come up with a techno-political kind of government, perhaps, but free of corruption and able to really do what's in the best interest of the country with a reform agenda that will then shake loose the potential for billions of dollars in aid. Can that new prime minister and government in the next 60 days affect that mission? We all have to stay focused for that. That's our last and best shot in the immediate. So those are two things in that regard. Now, when you look a little more medium term, there's a kind of a conditional front, if you will, and an unconditional front. On the conditional front, the United States and France are both saying, look, there are two tools we have to encourage you. One tool is you don't get any money until you get for financial readjustment and to save yourself. You don't get that money unless you have a reform agenda that's against anti-corruption and transparent. The second tool they have are sanctions. And what they have to be concerned about on these sanctions is that they don't go after one religion or one group of people, and that they don't use it too loosely, because if they do, it could backfire on them. And that's the counsel that many experts are giving the United States government now, that look, there are people, there are terrorism problems, there are corruption problems, there may be individuals that have that deserve to be sanctioned, but if that's the only arrow in your quiver, that could be a huge issue. So that has to be tempered. Then you get to the unconditional side. The unconditional side of the equation is we cannot have conditions when it comes to supporting the LAF, as Karen alluded to, anti-poverty, refugees, food aid, civil society, school aid, university aid. That has to be unconditional, and that can go through NGOs. So I think that's the way to look at it. Two issues in the next 60 days, and then two ways of looking at the midterm with a caution on how to use sanctions. I hope that answers your question. We may not have any other questions. Let me just look really quickly. Does anybody else want to speak before I turn it back over to Spence? It doesn't look it. We have a very shy, oh, Karen wants to say something, and if there's nobody else, we'll go to Karen.
So there was a lot of reports in the papers about people calling residents in Beirut and asking if they could buy their house. And these were, quote, anonymous purchasers. Do we know anything about that? And I have to admit, this brought back memories of growing up hearing about the, quote, Kissinger plan of moving out the Lebanese and putting in another population.
Karen, this is a good point. We gave that rumor to David Hale directly, and he said he would look into it. And I think there is a concern that there are some people trying to take advantage of poor people who lost their homes. So we have passed that information along. As you know, we don't get much involved on the ground in Lebanon with policies. And in that regard, we try to look with American eyes at American policy.
This was what I referred to, of course, the Kissinger plan, which I heard on both sides of the, here in America. And then when I went to Lebanon from my cousins there who grew up there, this was a policy that was being advocated by our State Department.
What, to buy the homes?
No, this was to repopulate Lebanon with non-Lebanese people. Right.
Well, that's somebody's stupid proposal about bringing as many Christians as you can to Lebanon so that they will outnumber the Muslims. I mean, that is not a policy by the United States, but of one or two individuals who are promoting that. But it's nothing that I think has traction within the United States government. We're right at the top of the hour, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. Yeah, and well, thank you. We appreciate everybody's tuning into this today, and I hope you got a good sense of some of the activities that have gone on. I think the accomplishments have been pretty substantial on varieties of fronts, but especially with regard to developing a good foothold in Congress, a good rapport with the State Department, some really incredible humanitarian activities that were put together quickly and successfully. And we just wanted to share it with people who are part of our group, either members or friends. And we thank you for joining. We'll do more of these, I'm sure. and hope you'll join us for those. But thanks for participating, and we're 2 minutes over, which is not bad for the Lebanese speaking situation. So
And big shout out to Betty Sams, who we didn't get to say hello to. So thank you.
Thank
thanks,
you. It
everybody.
was excellent.
See you all soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.